Welcome to the Growth Whispers podcast, where everything we talk about is helping leaders and CEOs and people driving companies to build enduring great companies. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined today with my co-host, as I am every week, Mr. Brad Giles. Brad, how are things going for you today?
Things are pretty good today. And today we're going to switch it up a little bit and start our intro with something that we kind of recommend people do in meetings. And that is, so what's your one word or one phrase that kind of summarizes where you're at today? So for me, it could be personal, it could be professional, but for me, I'm thinking it's the weekly meeting. And that's just because as I contemplate,
Isn't that three
you know,
words?
yeah, it could be a word or a phrase.
Okay,
Um,
okay, okay.
but as I contemplate where I'm at, what I've been doing, so much time has been working with teams trying to get weekly meetings right. It's been a real central part of what I've been
Yep.
doing, and making sure that they've got the agenda right and that it's a habit that's formed. So yeah, my to kick us off, my first one phrase open would be weekly meeting. What about yourself?
Yeah, and before we get, I was thinking, I didn't have my weekly meeting with my team today because it's family day here in Canada when we're recording this. And I really missed it. Like our weekly meetings are amazing. We come together, we sort stuff out, we make decisions, and we move the firm ahead. And we help move our clients ahead because we'll troubleshoot some client issues as well. So, and it reminds me of a quote, meeting is leading. Right, meetings are the leader's main leadership tools. So yeah, it's a powerful world and word. Sorry, and I missed that today. Actually, I sent my team a video as I was driving along to wish them. I probably shouldn't tell people I was recording videos while I was driving. We'll scratch that. But I was recording a video, and I sent them a video just wishing them happy Family Day because yeah, I really missed that meeting. My word today, I would say happy, but that's like too cheesy and blah. I'm actually calm. And calm is not a state that I am normally in. I'm high energy and, a little always on the go. And I had some time over the weekend to chill. I got a couple of mornings to really just take it easy. Like I had a morning where I got up and I watched part of a Netflix series for like an hour or 90 minutes. Like that is not the normal way I operate. And it was actually good. I feel like things really got to settle down. Had some good time with some friends and some kids. But yeah, so it's Kevin being calm, which people that know me well would probably laugh at that thought because that's that's far
Does
from, but
seem a little bit unusual. I
it's
mean,
a little
you
bit unusual, but it was rejuvenating. And that's, it's, for us as leaders, when we're pushing hard all the time, we need that sometimes. And I ended up not going away this weekend because it was way too cold where we were going to go up in the mountains. And yeah, so I ended up with some chill time and some calm. And it was great. It was really good.
awesome, awesome. Well, let's see how we go with
Today,
that. Let's see how we
yeah,
go with that concept of
we'll
um,
take the calm weekly meetings into our show today.
yeah, and look, we're role playing as well. Like it's a good way to open up a meeting to talk about what's your one phrase open or your one word open. Either way,
Mhm.
so we're obviously doing it for a reason there. So tell us, what have we got on the show today?
Well, today we have a series of 7 of the most brilliant questions for making people decisions you will ever hear. I first heard these from Jim Collins a few years ago in a private lab where we've taken a bunch of CEOs to go spend a couple of days within his laboratory in Boulder. Groups from all around the world, amazing events. I mean, Jim is the master of masters. He is the researcher of what it really takes to build enduring great companies. Amazing work. But he shared these 7 questions, and they're so damn simple, but they're brilliant when you need to make a decision of what Jim calls the demarcation line, that line that you cross, and you decide whether you're going to develop a person or let them go and replace them. And leaders struggle with this all the time. And we do quarterly reviews of talent, or at least twice a year with essentially every company we work with because it helps to build the strength of the team. But people always struggle with how to decide and make the call. Do we continue to develop them or do we replace them? It's not an easy question unless you use these 7 questions. So these 7 questions are outstanding, and they give you incredible clarity on what to do with your people.
And so often, you and I, when we're coaching or working with CEOs and leaders, we inevitably get to the point where we're saying, well, um, what do what seems to be the problem here? And then the person is responding and they're saying, well, I'm just not sure if person X is going to make it. I'm not sure some of the behaviors that they've exhibited or some of the things that are happening, like it doesn't feel right in the gut. And that ambiguity, what we're trying to do here is to put some discipline around that, to say if you ask these
Correct.
7 questions, it should give you a greater sense of understanding about what to do next. Really, how should you do it? And like, it is absolutely amazing how long people will go in that state of not knowing, of just
Right.
uncertainty, and it has a negative impact all the way through. I first came to understand these questions in their current form when I read Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 by Jim Collins, that we're obviously
Yep.
talking about today.
Yep.
But many of these questions I was already intuitively using with clients when I was coaching them. It was because this comes up so often. There's a
It
few
does.
that I hadn't used in that format before, but overall, just a great formal list to work through to help you to get to a place of confidence about the individual.
Yeah, and there's another angle that happens here because as companies grow, people that were high performers in a role sometimes slip into a bad place.
Mm.
And sometimes, you need to make tough calls and people that were great before and you got to try and calibrate it. So it's not just the people that you've hired that aren't working. It's long-term people where something doesn't seem to be working anymore and you're trying to isolate the variables and figure out what you're going to do. Interestingly, when we go through these now, by the way, when you use these 7 questions, and we have another 20 that we use with this, we use these 7 when we're uncertain. These are the deal breaker decision making kinds of questions to help us go one way or the other. And generally, most of the time, believe it or not, the outcome is to give them a shot for another quarter based on very specific things that we uncover with these questions. It doesn't actually lead to, we're going to replace them automatically as much as I first thought it might. It leads to, we will try developing these 2 things. Now, if that doesn't work, then we will replace it. And you're basically isolating what could be a management or leadership issue to what is a person's issue and reconciling those 2 with a clear action plan. So they're absolutely beautiful and they give you much greater sense of certainty about your decision. So should we just jump right in? And by the way, in his new book, BE 2.0, which is Beyond Entrepreneurship, which was his first book he ever wrote, this is an update to it. And it's fascinating in the audiobook, and I'm an audiobook person. What I love is they use 2 different voices. Jim's voice is the new content, and then the other reader's voice or the other person's voice is for the content that was there. So they're honoring the old content, and then they're putting the fresh new insights into it. It's really highly recommend the book.
And I've
And
said
those of
this
you that are,
I've
go
said
ahead.
this before on the podcast, but before this second version of Beyond Entrepreneurship, you and I did an event with the growth faculty, actually,
Yep.
where Jim was a guest, and we were asked in the questions, what was your favorite book? And I was one of very few people whose favorite book was Beyond Entrepreneurship, amongst Good
Yep.
to Great, Great by Choice, all of these other ones. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of the prescriptive nature of Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 and the original. And yeah, so
Awesome.
definitely one of our favorite books here. So let's jump straight into it, shall we?
Yeah. So, question number one. Are you beginning to lose other people by keeping this person in the seat? When he says seat, he means job. So, is this person, because they're in your company, causing other people to leave? And in particular, good people to leave because they're frustrated to work with, or frustrating, sorry, to work with.
Yeah. The beyond this or behind this, A players won't work for B's or C's, right?
Yep.
So there's a little bit of context in there. Now, it doesn't matter hierarchically where they are. They could be two layers down, but if we're beginning to lose people, you know, I've seen people say, "Yeah, but this person has got, this person, we would lose so much revenue. We would lose so much
They're
market
so
share.
talented.
They're so
The
we
customers love them.
Yeah,
Yes.
all of those things. And yes, I want them to become better. And I know that we've lost one or more people because of that person. And then they justify it by coming back to, I can't reconcile the fact that this senior person might go. So if you're losing people because of another person, like that is, imagine a person waving a 10-foot flag that's colored red as big as you can in your boardroom. That's what's happening here, right? If people are resigning because of other people, this requires
Yes.
action.
And that means you should. And by the way, in companies I work with, I am very, very passionate about making sure we do exit interviews when we lose good people.
Yeah.
And there are some people on HR teams internally that can really excavate the truth. And sometimes when it's really sensitive, you might not do. And we have one person on our team that does a lot of exit interviews to go and for sure get the truth. So if you lose an A player, it's a massive sin, big problem. Please make sure you're doing a proper exit interview to really get the goods. And through this, if people are naming the same person again and again, or that they all work under that same manager, one layer or two layers down, there's patterns there. We got to pay attention to it. So that's one thing. Generally, if they're causing you to lose good people, you're probably going to be more likely to replace, as long as they have been given the feedback and told they need to work on it, and they haven't, which often is the challenge. We don't often give people the feedback they need and let them know that behavior has to change. So number one, are you beginning to lose other people by keeping this person in the seat? Number two, I love this one. And when we do this one for people, we'll go through and review, entire leadership teams, or, Jim calls the key seats, and which is somewhere between the top 20 and 50 or 70 people in an organization, the
Yeah.
most important roles. Um, and then when we get to this question, when there's some concerns, we will make very specific notes in our documentation about what is, and the question is this: do you have a values problem, a will problem, or a skills problem? So basically, what's the issue with the person? And it might be none, but is it values like they don't fit? And what we'll do then is we will note the specific core value of the company and what
Mhm.
the specific issue is, because at the end, spoiler alert, you got to do something. So
You
we're
need to take
starting to make
action.
notes. You do, otherwise it's not an academic exercise. You're doing this so you can have a conversation and give them feedback so they can hopefully, be fit for the job. So
And
values
all of
problem,
these
which we
things, I'm sorry, all of these things can be, can be critical. If the person doesn't align with our values, if they are actively breaching the values, like that isn't going to go away as a problem. That's going to be there. If the person doesn't
no.
have the will to succeed, if they, just want to coast along, or they don't want to achieve the numbers that we set as a business, or they're not determined, that's not going to go away. And equally, if they aren't skilled enough, it's not going to go away.
Right. Or if they have a serious, anger issue, or if they're seriously rude or disrespectful to people, sometimes that stuff doesn't change. So is it a values problem? If so, what is the, or the second one, is it a will problem? Is that they don't have that will to do great work. They don't push through to completion or do that extra 10%. That's a tricky one because values problems are kind of burnt in. Will, sometimes people can have a will problem because they're reporting to the wrong manager. Their manager is demotivating them and they're not liking it. Sometimes they can have a will problem because they're in the wrong job.
Yeah.
Right. And those are both kind of environmental factors of the person that you work with or the team that you're on and the actual job that they're doing. So with the will problem, we'll note what is the specific issue. And then we'll also have a discussion. What might change that? And we start
Yeah.
having a conversation about their strengths and the areas where they generally thrive, because sometimes we got to change a role. Often we
Yeah.
have to change a role.
I had an issue with that this morning, in fact, and I was working with a leader, and we were talking about an individual who was shipping on time. So the product was shipping on time, which was the metric, and they're going, yeah, but it's just not working, because there's lots of unforced errors. There's lots of things that are happening that it's not connected to the shipping time, but the customer will ring up and say, oh, look, we've got this problem with that, or we've got this problem with this. And so um, when we drilled down into it, it was about the person's will. They didn't have the will to dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of quality. Now, we've found workarounds to that now, but yeah, we had to drill into exactly why it is.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We had one leader in a company. He was really good at his job, and he was really big on coaching his kids in sports. It turned out that his priority was coaching his kids in sports. So, that was his number one. And I mean, that's perfect for him in his life, but it affected his role because he didn't have the will to put in the extra work that was required in the role he was in. And which was, that didn't work out so well because it was, yeah, his priorities were elsewhere. And then the final is skills problem. And I mean, Brad, I think we all have skills problem. We're all constantly learning, but is it a lack of skill keeping them from thriving in their role?
Yeah.
And and you got to look at, is it a developable skill, a skill they can get better at? We go back to top grading and their competency grid, and they're red, yellow, green. Red means very difficult to change. Competencies and skills are in the similar direction. So you got to make sure, is it a skill that people can learn? If they're not assertive enough, that's not going to change, right? If they're not good at analysis, probably not going to change. But there are a lot of skills. Like some people, might need to learn more on Excel or customer service training or who knows what. But is there a skill problem? What is the specific skill? And it's not up to us to decide in some cases whether they could or couldn't learn it. We got to give them the feedback, give them a chance. And then if a couple quarters in a row that skill hasn't changed and it's critical to that role, well, maybe we need to look at a different role or a different company. So question number 2 in summary, do you have a values problem, a will problem, or a skills problem? Want to take us through number 3, Brad? I love this one.
Number 3, what's the person's relationship to the window and the mirror? An unusual question, but let's just dig into that. So the right people look out the window when things go right, giving credit to others, okay? The wrong people look in the mirror, assigning credit to themselves, okay? So when things go right, when things go well, the right people are saying our team did a great job. They're saying, I want to acknowledge person A, person B, person C, they've done a great job. The wrong people are, when things go well, are saying, yes, I did a good job here. Okay. Inversely, when things go wrong, the right people are saying, it was that person or that person or that person. They're looking elsewhere. They're not taking accountability. So what is their
And I look at this,
relationship?
Brad, and I look at this as a simple summary that for me is, I look at it as when stuff goes wrong,
Yeah.
do they point out the window and blame somebody else, or do they look in the mirror?
Yeah.
And we're looking for mirror people that self-reflect when things don't go right, so they get smarter and more capable. versus the blamers who stay problematic.
Because the blamers will never change. The people who are always
No,
looking out the window, they're always going to be like that. And you
because they're
can't.
ignoring the data. They're ignoring the data. The data says you screwed up, but they're ignoring the data, so then they don't have to change.
Yeah, yeah. And we can't operate as an effective team with those kind of people. If you've got four people in a team who are all looking out the window and one person who's looking in the mirror, or vice versa, like, this is going to catch up with you. You're not going to be able to sustain that.
Yeah, and they're irritating as hell because they don't. Well, first of all, they make excuses all the time and they don't get better. So if you've got a window person that looks outside and look at, we all make excuses. Sometimes we are human. We're prideful. Sometimes our pride gets in the way, right? And I have done it. I try not to, but we're still human. But those people generally, they're not good learners, because when you look in the mirror and take responsibility, it hurts and it forces growth. So yeah, I've had many people, and this is one of my favorite questions in this as well, because it's a real defining question. The people who look in the mirror can learn and grow,
Mhm.
or have the ability to learn and grow. They may not have some skills to be able to do that, but the people who continually blame, if that doesn't change, it's going to be Groundhog Day, and you're going to have the same issue again and again and again. And normally, the people that can't look in the mirror, it's a pride or an ego issue,
Yeah.
or insecurity issue, where they have a hard time admitting fault.
And that's
And
important. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Brad.
And that's important because we don't want to point fingers. It's not for that purpose. We want them to learn and grow. When we come together with a team or people, we're looking at them and saying, how can we get this person to come better? And if
Yep.
they're always pointing blame at others, they're never going to be able to learn. And that's just
No.
such a fundamental problem to growth.
Yep, and in many ways it's sort of that can be a deciding question. If you can't help them shift, and then sometimes you got to work with them and try and help them, but if you can't get them to be more of a mirror person when things don't go right, um, they're probably not going to change. So question number 3, what's a relationship with the window and the mirror? The window sharing great when things go well, they give credit, but when things go bad, they take responsibility. That's what we're looking for. So number 4, and this is a simple question, do they
Mm.
see work as a job or a responsibility?
I love this one. This is
It's,
this is such a good one, and I think this was Good to Great, where Jim Collins, through the interviews, that
yep,
they identified a data point, which was, in the great companies, leaders saw their work as a responsibility. In the, let's say, not great companies, or the comparison companies,
yep,
people saw their work as a job. Such a difference there. And when we look at a person where that we're uncertain about, and we say, does this person see work as a job or a responsibility? Like, it's so insightful as to what's really going on there. Your first question or your first thought might be, well, they go home at 5 o'clock, but it's so much more than that.
it is, and it's interesting, even with my own team and our firm. Um, we have our weekly meetings at 5:30 on Monday nights. One of the guys is on Eastern time, so he starts his version at 8:30 p.m. They want this time because we're often busy during the days, and everyone is fully committed. But we had someone on the team at one point who just, really wasn't all into that. You know, they would do it occasionally, but it was more of a job for them. And there's nothing wrong with people that want a job. Like, if you want just a job with your set hours, and when things get bumpy, it's you're off the clock, you're off the clock. And there's nothing wrong with that for certain people. But in a growth company like we work with, you don't want a lot of those kinds of people, particularly not in leadership positions.
Yeah.
Right? You can't, because it's, sometimes things are messy and crazy. You need people that can jump in and make it happen. And it might not even be the person doesn't have that within them, maybe their manager isn't pulling out of them, maybe they're
Yeah.
disengaged, but whatever it is, they it's like they can't be counted on. They're not, when things are really hit a crunch, they're not all in.
And think about being an employee who reports to someone who views their work as a job and not a responsibility. You will eventually get a mindset which is, well, if they don't care, why should I care?
Yeah.
And
If they're already here at 4:31, and if I need something, they're not going to help me, and they're not going to respond to my requests, why it creates a whole culture like that where people are like, forget it. If they're not doing it, I'm not doing it.
and it comes back to what we said before, right? A players don't work for B's or C's.
No. Well, at least not for long, because they drive them crazy.
Correct.
So, number four, does the person see work as a job or responsibility? Leaders and growing companies and the people that we want in our team see it as a responsibility, and they really care. And it's not even just about the hours you said, Brad. They really care and have deep concern and conscientiousness about doing things right. Number five, this is another very powerful one. Has your confidence in the person gone up or down in the past year? It's a beautiful one. It's the trend line, the trajectory. Are you feeling more confidence in their abilities or less confidence in their abilities? And it's like when you make a new friend or you meet somebody new, and you first meet people, most people show up great. But at a certain point, month on month, you know, as you get to know them better and better, do you feel better about them, or not feeling better about them? It's a wonderful, wonderful question.
One thing I love about this question is that it's got the time frame. If it was just, has your confidence in the person gone up or down, you could be challenged by the direction of the wind, for want of a better analogy, right? Oh, they've had a bad
Right.
week.
Because it's long term. It's not just
Yes.
yesterday.
Yeah, so I love the fact that it's wrapped up at the end by in the past year, because then you go,
Yeah.
well, it was all good until a few weeks ago. All right, well, maybe he's going through a divorce, or there there's something else that's really
Yeah. Maybe,
problematic.
or maybe they're just having a rough week. Yeah.
Maybe they're having a rough week, or maybe, right? But there is such insight into the time of, has your confidence in the person gone up or down in the past year? Because that really makes you think about, what is the long-term trajectory, and how confident am I person in this person's abilities?
Yeah. And we all know how we feel about people over time and how that changes. Now, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means you need to do something. Now,
Yeah.
it could be giving them feedback, giving them support, giving them coaching, changing their job, making sure they take a vacation. Who knows? You know your people, you should know them well. But it means you got a serious issue here because they're on the decline. They're kind of like bananas you have on your counter, and they're starting to get over ripened. Like they're going in a bad direction. So you need to find something to change that trajectory, or you have a massive problem. So that's number five. Has your confidence index in the person gone up or down in the past year?
And then number six, oh, and this one will make one take a step back for a moment. Do you have a bus problem or a seat problem, right? So we've got to step back. This is a very Jim Collins esque thing. Okay, so we've got to define what that means for those who may not be familiar. So he says the first thing in terms of building a great enduring company is, you've got to have the right people on the bus in the right seat, ultimately doing the right things in the right way. Okay, and that is, imagine your company is a bus. Each person has an assigned seat. They've got to be in the right seat. So then when we come back to this question, do you have a bus problem or a seat problem? Is the person on the wrong bus, or are they in the wrong seat? Because there could be, maybe they're an A player in a different seat in the bus. And
Yes.
um, if you've gone through all of those previous five questions and you're like, it doesn't make any sense, maybe what this question is saying is, Well, what if they're just in the wrong job? What if we put them into a
Yeah.
different job? They could really thrive.
And that's important because like and we've talked about it a few times. Sometimes it's about the manager or the role. Sometimes you have to split the role. As a company grows, they might have been, the controller for the company and handling some of the treasury. When you're big enough, you just might need someone to handle treasury only. Or you might have a couple of controllers for different divisions. You might need to change a role to suit them. And I love the are they on the wrong bus? Because at this point, you've already gone through a few more thoughts about the person. You've looked at them from a few different angles. But the wrong bus ties into generally the into the core values in question number two. But you just might have them in the wrong company. And I'll tell you, Brad, we've talked about this before. Every company that we go into, especially ones in the messy growth stages, or ones that have been around for a long time with a very comfortable family environment, we usually have to make some big changes. There's
Hmm.
a bunch of people that are actually on the wrong bus. And it's been challenging sometimes at one organization where they were family members of the CEO, and we had to move them off the bus. It's not fun. But if you look at what's good for the company, you got to, based on what the company needs, and on the right bus in many cases is about cultural fit. Um, yeah, and the right seat is a skill set to do the right job. But those are hard decisions, and you and I both spend a lot of time on it. And I believe it's some of the greatest value we add to organizations is helping the CEOs to make these decisions, and also making sure they give people the feedback and opportunity to step up and keep their job,
Yeah.
i.e., we eliminate the CEO or the executive, and bad management practices as a problem, so that we're being respectful to the people, and at the end of the day, giving them enough feedback, which we'll talk to at the end of this, that if they don't step up, either they don't have the capability or they don't want it bad enough.
In the book, Jim goes into nuance about this particular question. Do you have a bus problem or a seat problem? And he says that
Yep.
we've got the company hedgehog, okay? Hedgehog meaning what's our purpose? What can we be the best at?
Yep.
And thirdly, what drives our economic engine? And he said that what we want is to have each person in each seat living their own personal hedgehog. Okay, so if you can
Yes.
imagine that metaphor of the bus, is that person actually living their own personal hedgehog? So,
Yeah.
are they deeply passionate about their current role or not? Could they be the best at their current role or not? And
Yeah.
is it driving their economic engine? So, thinking about it like that is a great way to think more deeply about this question. Do we have a bus problem or a seat problem? Because when we get all of the seats on the bus with each person on the seats living their personal hedgehog, and then the whole company,
Oh,
it's where success is born.
it's a beautiful thing because
Mm.
people are at their best. There's a chapter in my book, Your Oxygen Mask First, called Sweet Spot. When you're in their sweet spot where you do the best work, that not only do you produce great results, but you're getting a great intrinsic reward, so you feel amazing too. And
Yeah.
that's the role of the CEO and the senior leadership. Well, the CEO for the executive team and often their direct reports, to make sure those two layers, CEO's job, those two layers, you have the right people in the right seats, have excellent people in those roles where they're thriving. And then the executives will do with their directors or whoever's below them in that next level. And that's, you get the top 2, 3 layers of a company sorted out like that. Beautiful things happen. But
Yeah.
that's a heck of a lot of work. And you got to run through these 7 questions every quarter for a few years to really get all of this dialed in most companies. So, yeah, awesome question. Bus problem or seat problem? And then it obviously begs you to action. What are you going to do about it? And then finally, the piece de resistance, to use the French phrase, the masterful question. And I've added my own couple words onto this, to help people, because I've asked this question to people probably 400 or 500 times,
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah. Me too.
It's, how would you feel if the person quit and gave you 3 to 6 months notice? Because when you ask
Mm.
how you feel the person's quit, a lot of people go into scarcity. Better to have a body than no body, right? But so I add in and the 3 to 6 months notice so they don't freak out and have a panic attack, and then they can make a clearer decision. And if you think about it, and if your answer is relieved, uh, do your freaking job and be an adult, right? If you're relieved if they quit, that means you're the parent waiting for the child to be the adult. You're waiting
Yeah.
for them to quit and do your job. It's not right. It's not right. So relieved means you've left it way too long and you need to do your job. So call HR, or get your manager involved or get your board involved if you're a CEO, but deal with the issue. Don't make them do your dirty work unless it's your strategy to counsel them out and do it in a nice way. That's different
Yep.
versus, you know, I'm just, man, I wish they would quit. I don't want to deal with it. And yeah, anyway, it's a beautiful question. And if you would be like horrified or stressed or upset, that tells you you probably want to fight for the person and develop like hell. You have a lot of hope or belief.
Yeah, and so just for clarity, Jim's question is, how would you feel if the person quit? And yours, Kevin's addition is in and gave you 3 to 6 months notice.
Yes.
And again, just great insight into what are you really, why is your gut telling you this, and what's really happening there? Is it your loyalty to the person or your fear of doing your job that is making this a problem,
Yeah.
right? Because I've seen
But there's
loyalty
oh,
can equally be a massive, massive problem,
it it,
especially
it
in older
is.
companies.
It is when they've been around there since this, they've been in the company 20 or 30 years and a person's near retirement age. I've had companies where I said, well, then pay them to stay home.
Yeah.
Like, if the bottom line can afford it or the family values of the organization require it, they're not adding value. Pay them to stay home for a year. Give them some special projects. But there's cases where people just they're actually in the way, and they know it in many cases. But so yeah, it's a super important question, and it has been it's sealed the deal on many people. And when that is a relieved, happy, ecstatic, or any kind of word like that comes out, it's like, okay, now hear me clearly. I'm not a big believer in kind of being a hatchet man or hatchet woman or hatchet person, and being ruthless to people. We want to, and as Jim said, allow people to maintain their dignity. I mean,
Yeah.
ideally, we can encourage someone to go and find another role. Like, when it gets to letting people go, I have some strong thoughts because I've been
Mm.
involved in it for a lot of people. They have to have been really given the real feedback, and so they know that if this doesn't happen, if this doesn't happen, you lose your job.
Yep.
Maybe in nicer terms. And yes, they're still going to act and be upset like they didn't know, but that's a normal human reaction. But they should know, and it should be documented well. And this is where HR is a great help to help you make sure it's documented well. When there's been executives that CEOs want to let go, I have asked to see the documentation myself. I want to see it. I
Yeah.
want to make sure the person's been given a real fair chance. But there's this piece around allowing them to maintain their dignity. Can we counsel them out? No, if say it was you, Brad. Say, Brad, I know this isn't working. This is hard, and you're probably not going to be happy here. And so why don't we work on a plan over the next 3 or 4 months? That you can start looking for another job. Take off during the day when you need to do your interviews. I'm going to give you a great reference for your role as a controller, and support you. But let's just help you go find something else because it's been great, but it's what the company needs today based on it is probably going to be challenging. So if you've got a great relationship or respect, finding a positive way to help them move on. Now, you know, if they're doing criminal activity, you probably wouldn't do that.
No,
But
no,
but
of
but how do you,
course.
how do you like at the end of the day, the thing that I again and again, you or someone in the company made the decision to hire them.
Yeah.
So you as a leader, you made an error. and or you promoted them when you shouldn't have, or somebody, another leader in your company did, or you kept them in the role too long. So we have a notable responsibility when someone fails in our organization. It's not all on them. Like, it's easily 50% our fault, because we would
100,
have,
yeah.
or more, because we would have made the hiring decision or the promotion decision, or maybe we didn't give enough feedback, or who knows what. So knowing that you're at least half the problem, you should treat them accordingly, and be respectful when you're helping someone to move out. But um, make the call.
And this question, how would you feel if the person quit? It's last for a reason. Because when you've
Yeah,
worked through all of those other questions, it's almost like that's the catalyst that
it is.
makes you say, oh, well, I, you know, when I think about things like, is their work a job or responsibility? Has my confidence gone down? Or it's gone down? When I go through these things, like it kind of it makes it a more solid answer. Do you have a bus? Sorry,
Yes.
how would you feel if the person quit? Um, and and again, I really do love that in the next and give you 3 to 6 months notice, because so many times I've had that as well, where people say, "Oh, look, it'll be a nightmare because how are we going to get someone to fill that role? There's
It's our
nobody around
busiest
here."
time of the season.
Oh
Hard, yeah,
yeah,
hard role to, like, all that stuff. So you got to take the fear out of the manager's mind.
yeah, yeah,
But you're right, Brad. It's a great ending because you've already gone through and excavated much, a bunch more facts and data. If you had that question up front, it's not going to be as impactful because it's a high level opinion. But now you've ground through the person from 6 other angles. Now it's the deal closer, right? And when you get to that point, again, it's not as often as I would expect that people would be relieved. There's
yeah,
always a couple, but once you go through this cycle 3, 4, 5 times, and if they haven't made notable improvement, at some point now they would be relieved because they've given them a bunch of chances and there's been no change. So then the final thing after this is you got to go have a conversation. I mean, that's our job as managers and leaders all the time, anyways, but most people aren't great at it. So it's the conversation about, and it could be a subtle little conversation. They could be a really great person, and maybe we take a couple responsibilities off their plate, or we give them some new responsibilities, or we get them to go work on this or work on that, whatever it happens to be. But it's a caring conversation to help the person get closer to being their best. And even with your highest performers, you should be doing this too. We use a different tool for that, but it's a conversation. And my belief, and whether you have what they call pips, like performance improvement plans in your company or not, at some point the conversation needs to go into their goals,
yeah,
right? And when we have quarterly goals for the leaders we work with, we have one for a resilience goal based on the stuff in my book, and then a growth goal for how they grow and improve as a leader. So content from this stuff often would go into a growth goal, unless they need to work on resilience that came out of this, or it might go into one of their goals for their job.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, managing and leading people through goals, or managing by objective, is the way to help them have clarity and to make sure that the feedback just doesn't fall on the floor and not get taken into what they're going to work on.
The thing between that is transparency, right? And the objective broadly is that there should be no surprises. Okay. Now,
Yes.
I remember in my company 15 years ago, there was a particular person who, um, let's just say they weren't making the numbers and they didn't want to make the numbers, right?
Mm.
Um, and so I simply stuck to the process, which is, in order to make this role financially work, these are the KPIs. There are other peers at your level who are achieving these KPIs,
Yep.
and continually talking about them, not hunt all day, every day,
Yes.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
within the context of the meeting rhythm, the weeklies, the dailies, and so forth, always talking about them in a way that is like, look, you're red again. for the 14th week in a row.
Yeah.
What's your plan to turn it around? So when, as a leader, when you've got that level of transparency, this last bit, take action to help them grow or leave, it should be no surprise at all. And in fact, going back to that person self-selected because they said, look, I just don't think that I'm going to be able to make these KPIs. And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful outcome because they know that you have high performance standards here. They know what they are, and they know that you're not going to change, and they can't kind of work or rort the system. And so they get to that point where you don't have to have the uncomfortable conversation. It's just like, well, Kevin, we know that this isn't working, and so you can kind of take
Yeah.
it from there.
And that goes back to like the dashboards we talked about in the last episode, episode 45, where it's about having clear KPIs and clear goals. And so if you look at some of the basics that we make sure companies have, Brad, is having clear KPIs and goals for each person or each key department at a minimum helps for clarity and accountability. And these kinds of feedback conversations, which can go into, become part of those goals, those are very simple things and they're often missed. And it not only makes it harder to manage people, it also makes harder for those people to know what great looks like and to perform. So
But
awesome.
these questions are designed when you're stuck thinking about a person as a manager.
Yes,
So if you're thinking, I don't know what to do, get into these questions and this will give you a path forward, be it left or right.
exactly. So number one, are you beginning to lose other people by keeping this person in the seat they're in? Number two, do you have a values problem, a will problem, or a skills problem with this person? Number three, what's the person's relationship to the window and the mirror? Number four, does the person see work as a job or a real responsibility? I added the word real in there. Five, is your confidence in the person gone up or down in the past year? Do you have a bus problem or a seat problem? And then finally, how would you feel if the person quit? And then the little add on by myself of, and gave you 3 to 6 months notice so you don't have a panic attack. And then finally, okay, great. Take that information, have a conversation, go and work with this person and help them be successful. That's our job. And if it is the end of the road, make sure you've given them a best chance and then let them go, free up their future to go find a job they can thrive in because it's apparently not with you.
Awesome. Just such a great tool for coaches, for CEOs, for executives, managers. Just it's so simple and good. So, with that, let's move to close. Great episode today. Thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, as always, joined by my co-host Kevin Lawrence. For the video version of this, you can go to YouTube and search the Growth Whisperers. You can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com, and you can find myself, Brad, at evolutionpartners.com.au. Thanks very much. We look forward to chatting to you again next week. Have a great week.